The clock on the kitchen wall ticked quietly, each second echoing in the tense silence. It was 7:15 a.m. on a cold, gray Tuesday morning, the kind of morning when Seattle's persistent drizzle blurred the edges of the world outside. I sat at the marble island, my hands wrapped tightly around a steaming cup of black coffee, hoping its warmth might chase away the chill settling deep inside my bones. The house, a sprawling craftsman mansion nestled behind a wall of evergreen trees, had never felt so cold. My husband, Daniel, paced back and forth near the French doors leading out to our perfectly manicured garden. His footsteps echoed sharply on the polished wooden floor, the sound grating against my nerves. I didn't dare meet his eyes, instead staring down into the swirling darkness of my coffee, sensing the storm building within him. It was the same argument we'd had countless times, only now it felt different, dangerous, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. "It's just a credit card, Hannah." Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice edged with irritation and something darker. "I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of it." My pulse quickened, and I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Daniel, it's not just a credit card. This is about Jessica and her gambling debts. We can't keep enabling her every time she gets into trouble." He stopped abruptly, turning slowly to face me. His dark eyes narrowed, a muscle twitching dangerously along his jawline. "She's my sister," he said through clenched teeth, each word dripping with barely contained anger. "I won't leave her stranded because you're suddenly feeling selfish." My stomach twisted at his accusation. Selfish. It was a word he knew would cut deeply, a weapon he wielded skillfully after years of practice. But today, something shifted inside me, a quiet spark of defiance. "Selfish?" I echoed softly, finally lifting my gaze to meet his. "How is it selfish to protect us from your sister's reckless behavior? How many times are we supposed to bail her out, Daniel? How many times before it's enough?" His expression darkened, fury flashing like lightning behind his carefully composed facade. He strode across the kitchen until he stood towering over me, his presence suffocating, heavy with menace. I held my breath, forcing myself not to shrink back. "You'll give Jessica your credit card when she comes by later," he said slowly, his voice low, cold, and unmistakably threatening. End of discussion. For the first time in years, I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and defiant. Without breaking eye contact, I spoke firmly, clearly, and with a courage I hadn't known still existed within me. "No, Daniel. I'm done letting Jessica or you control me." His face twisted in a flash of raw, uncontrolled rage. Before I could react, he reached for his own cup on the counter and, without hesitation, flung the hot coffee directly into my face. Pain exploded across my skin, the scorching liquid soaking into my hair, blouse, and running down my neck. I gasped, my vision blurred with tears and shock, hearing the crash as the porcelain cup shattered at my feet. Through the ringing in my ears, Daniel's voice sliced like a blade. "You've made your choice, Hannah. Now you'll deal with the consequences." As I sat trembling in the aftermath, coffee dripping onto the marble countertop like bitter tears, one chilling realization crystallized in my mind. My marriage wasn't just broken, it had become dangerous. And I couldn't stay here anymore. My heart thundered violently in my chest as Daniel stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the heavy oak door behind him so forcefully that the framed photographs rattled against the wall. Pain radiated from my cheek and neck, a harsh reminder of the line he just crossed, a line that I had allowed to blur for far too long. I reached blindly for a kitchen towel, pressing it gently to my burning skin, wincing at both the sting of hot coffee and the deeper pain of betrayal. Slowly, I stood up, legs trembling beneath me. Shards of porcelain littered the pristine kitchen floor like tiny, jagged mirrors, each reflecting back fragments of my life. Kneeling carefully, I began to pick them up, tears finally spilling down my face as I caught glimpses of memories reflected in their broken surfaces, the laughter we'd once shared at this very island, the mornings spent dreaming about a future that now felt like a cruel illusion. But amid the pain came clarity, a fierce, undeniable clarity. Daniel's anger was no longer something I could rationalize away. It wasn't just an isolated outburst, but the culmination of years spent walking on eggshells, afraid of setting off his temper. Each fragment of porcelain felt heavier than the last, carrying with it the weight of countless silences, of compromises I'd convinced myself were acts of love. I finished cleaning the shattered pieces and placed them carefully into the trash, feeling oddly symbolic, as if I were finally discarding not just a broken cup, but the illusion of the perfect life Daniel had built around us. The house was silent now, oppressive in its emptiness. Glancing at the clock again, 7:45 a.m., I realized Jessica would arrive later today, expecting my obedience, my compliance, just as Daniel had promised. But something deep within me rebelled fiercely at the thought. I wouldn't be here. Not this time. Not ever again. With newfound resolve, I made my way upstairs to our lavish bedroom, though suddenly, nothing about this place felt truly mine. Pulling out a small suitcase from the back of the closet, my movements became rapid, determined. I grabbed only what mattered: essential clothing, important documents, and a small leather-bound journal, its worn pages filled with fragments of the person I used to be before Daniel molded me into someone I no longer recognized. At the bottom drawer of my nightstand lay an envelope I'd hidden months ago, emergency cash tucked discreetly beneath old greeting cards. My fingers brushed against it, relief flooding my veins. Daniel had always insisted on managing our finances, carefully keeping control over every aspect of our lives. But this money was mine, the quiet defiance I'd nurtured, knowing deep down I might one day need to escape. As I zipped up the suitcase, my gaze landed on the framed wedding photo sitting elegantly on our dresser. We looked so young, so happy. Two people who believed love was enough to conquer anything. My fingers hesitated over the silver frame before gripping it tightly, anger surging through me. Without thinking, I hurled the photograph against the bedroom wall. Glass exploded outward, showering the floor with shards that glittered like ice, releasing something inside me that had been trapped for far too long. I didn't belong here anymore. Not in this house, not in this marriage. Downstairs, I slipped on my coat and grabbed my keys, but my steps slowed as I passed the large mirror near the entryway. The woman staring back at me was almost unrecognizable, her cheek bright red from the burn, eyes swollen but fierce, determined to reclaim her dignity. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside into the chilly Seattle air, the drizzle soaking into my skin, a baptism of sorts, washing away remnants of weakness. Climbing into my car, I glanced back one final time at the sprawling mansion that had imprisoned me in luxury and loneliness for far too many years. As I pulled away from the curb, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Rachel's name lit up the screen, my best friend, my lifeline. I quickly tapped the speakerphone, her warm voice filling the cold silence. "Hannah, are you all right?" "You sound awful," she asked immediately, her concern palpable even through the phone. I left Rachel," I replied softly, voice shaking slightly as reality sank in. "He crossed a line today. I can't go back there." A brief pause followed, filled only by the quiet hum of tires on wet pavement. Then Rachel spoke again, her voice steady and reassuring, like an anchor grounding me amidst the chaos. "Come to Sunrise Coffee. We'll figure everything out together. You're not alone anymore." Relief washed over me, calming the panic that had been building since I'd driven away from that house. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, I truly believed I could rebuild my life, piece by shattered piece, on my own terms. I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing nothing but gray sky and rain-soaked streets behind me. Ahead lay uncertainty, freedom, and perhaps, just perhaps, the sweet promise of revenge. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the small parking lot behind Rachel's cafe, Sunrise Coffee House, nestled comfortably on a bustling street corner in downtown Seattle. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield as I turned off the engine, suddenly feeling frozen to my seat. Outside, the world moved quickly, people rushing beneath umbrellas, oblivious to the storm raging within me. I took a deep, trembling breath, fighting back the wave of anxiety threatening to paralyze me. Rachel's cafe had always been a safe place, filled with warmth, laughter, and the comforting scent of freshly ground coffee beans. But today, stepping inside felt like admitting something had truly broken in my life, something I couldn't easily repair. Gathering courage, I grabbed my suitcase and stepped out into the cold drizzle. The cafe's warm glow spilled out from its large windows, casting welcoming patterns of golden light onto the rain-soaked sidewalk. My pace quickened, desperation driving me toward that warmth, toward the promise of safety and comfort. The brass bell chimed gently as I pushed open the cafe door. Inside, the familiar aroma wrapped around me like an embrace: roasted coffee, vanilla pastries, and cinnamon. Rachel stood behind the counter, her sleeves rolled up, auburn curls loosely tied back. When she looked up and saw me, her welcoming smile faded instantly, replaced by a look of shock, then immediate concern. "Hannah," she murmured softly, setting down the steaming mug she'd been holding. Her eyes traveled over my red, swollen cheek and the damp blouse clinging awkwardly to my skin. She quickly rounded the counter, gently guiding me toward the back room, away from the curious eyes of customers sipping coffee and chatting quietly. Once we were safely behind the closed door of her small office, Rachel faced me fully, eyes wide and searching. "My God, Hannah, what happened?" Unable to hold back any longer, the truth poured from my lips in a torrent of raw, unfiltered emotion. "Daniel, he threw coffee at me. He demanded my credit card again, Jessica's debts, and when I finally refused, my voice cracked, betraying the pain and humiliation I'd been holding back." Rachel's expression hardened with quiet rage. "Oh, Hannah," she whispered, pulling me fiercely into her arms, her embrace both protective and comforting. "I'm so sorry. You don't deserve any of this." I leaned into her hug, feeling the warmth of true friendship, something I'd forgotten existed amid Daniel's carefully constructed isolation. For a moment, I allowed myself to simply be held, feeling my defenses slowly lower, my heart aching from exhaustion and relief. Eventually, Rachel gently guided me to a chair, kneeling in front of me as if determined to ensure I understood every word clearly. "Listen to me. You're not going back there, okay? I don't care what Daniel says or does. You're safe here." I nodded weakly, tears threatening again. "But, Rachel, I've been married to him for 8 years. He's controlled every aspect of my life, money, friends, everything. How do I even start over?" Rachel squeezed my hand, determination blazing in her eyes. "One step at a time, Hannah. First, we protect you. I'll call Julia Hastings today. She's the best divorce attorney in Seattle. If anyone can handle Daniel, it's her." Hearing Julia's name sent a rush of relief and dread through me simultaneously. I'd heard of her. Julia was known for being tough, relentless, and extremely effective. If anyone could help me escape Daniel's hold, it was Julia Hastings. As Rachel stepped away briefly to make the call, I allowed myself a moment to breathe deeply, looking around the cozy little office. Framed photographs hung along the walls, snapshots of Rachel's life, adventures, family, friends, vibrant and full of genuine happiness. My chest tightened with longing. How had I allowed myself to lose so much? How had Daniel managed to isolate me so completely? Rachel returned quickly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Julia agreed to meet with us immediately. She cleared her schedule the moment I explained the situation. "We'll meet her at her office in an hour." Gratitude overwhelmed me, mingled with apprehension. The thought of confronting the reality of divorce, of truly leaving Daniel, was both terrifying and exhilarating. Yet beneath my fear, a quiet determination grew stronger, fueled by Rachel's unwavering support. "Rachel," I whispered, feeling a sense of shame creep in alongside my gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled softly, squeezing my shoulder reassuringly. "You don't have to thank me, Hannah. Friends don't let friends fight battles like this alone. We'll get through this together." Her words resonated deeply within me, igniting a small spark of hope. Yes, Daniel had controlled me for years, using fear, guilt, and isolation as his weapons. But for the first time, I was no longer alone. I had allies, strength, and finally a chance at freedom. For now, that would be enough. Less than an hour later, Rachel and I arrived at Julia Hastings' downtown office, tucked discreetly within one of Seattle's sleek glass skyscrapers. Rain streamed in shimmering trails down the tall windows, obscuring the city skyline, lending a strangely comforting anonymity to our meeting. My heart raced with anxiety, but Rachel's presence beside me steadied my resolve. The receptionist led us down a softly lit hallway into an elegant yet welcoming office. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound law texts. At the center of the room, behind an expansive mahogany desk, sat Julia Hastings herself. She rose gracefully as we entered, extending a firm handshake, her eyes sharp yet compassionate. "Hannah, it's good to meet you," she said calmly, gesturing for us to sit across from her. Her voice exuded both authority and kindness, immediately reassuring me that I was in capable hands. Rachel filled me in briefly, but "I'd like to hear everything from your perspective." I took a deep breath, then began speaking, slowly at first, then more clearly, finding strength in each word. I recounted Daniel's escalating control, his financial manipulation, Jessica's endless demands, and finally, the violent morning that forced me into action. Rachel squeezed my hand occasionally, silently encouraging me through the hardest details. Julia listened attentively, never interrupting, her expression gradually shifting from calm professionalism to quiet, carefully controlled anger. When I finally finished, Julia paused for a long moment, letting my words settle. Then she leaned forward slightly, her gaze locked intently on mine. "Hannah, I'm sorry for everything you've endured. But the good news is, legally speaking, you're not powerless here. Daniel's behavior, especially the violence and coercive control, gives us leverage. First, I'll file for immediate legal protection, restraining Daniel from contacting or approaching you. Then, we'll petition to freeze shared assets and credit lines to prevent him or Jessica from retaliating financially." Her words were clear and decisive, each syllable filling me with cautious hope. Still, anxiety crept back in at the thought of Daniel's reaction. "Julia, he's powerful," I warned softly. "He has resources, influence. I'm terrified he'll try to punish me for leaving." Julia's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice unwavering. "Men like Daniel rely heavily on intimidation and control. But when faced with someone who refuses to be intimidated, they crumble faster than you'd expect. You're stronger than you realize, Hannah, and he knows that. He's counted on you, never finding your voice." Her words resonated deeply, touching on truths I had buried beneath years of self-doubt. For so long, Daniel had stripped away my strength, replacing it with fear and uncertainty. But right now, in Julia's office, sitting beside Rachel, I began to reclaim the courage I'd once lost. "What happens next?" I asked, my voice steadier now. Julia nodded, opening a file and pulling out a stack of carefully prepared documents. "We'll file these petitions immediately. You'll stay somewhere safe, ideally with Rachel, for a few days until we get an initial ruling. Then we'll focus on building your case for divorce, securing financial independence, and ensuring you're protected long-term." Rachel turned to me, determination etched into every line of her face. "You're staying with me. I won't let you face Daniel alone again." Julia smiled approvingly. "Good. The stronger your support network, the harder it will be for Daniel to manipulate you. And from now on, Hannah, document everything. Texts, calls, threats. Each detail matters. I nodded, feeling empowered by this practical, concrete plan. Yet one thought still gnawed at my confidence. Julia, Jessica, his sister, is involved. She's deep in gambling debts, always demanding money. Will she complicate things? Julia's gaze hardened slightly. Jessica's involvement only strengthens your case. It proves Daniel has repeatedly used financial abuse to control you. Trust me, they'll both regret dragging you into their toxic dynamic. Her words struck a chord of justice inside me, igniting a quiet fire in my chest. Daniel and Jessica had turned my kindness and patience into weapons used against me. Now they would face consequences, real, tangible consequences. Julia handed me her card, her expression reassuring yet fierce. You're not alone anymore, Hannah. From this moment forward, consider me your strongest ally. We'll confront Daniel together, and I promise he won't win this time. As we left Julia's office, Rachel and I stepped out into the wet streets of Seattle. The rain had slowed to a gentle mist, and despite the uncertainty still looming ahead, I felt lighter, as if a weight had finally begun lifting from my shoulders. You okay? Rachel asked quietly, her eyes filled with concern. I took a deep breath, tasting freedom in the damp air. Honestly, I'm scared but hopeful. For the first time in years, Rachel, I'm hopeful. Rachel linked her arm through mine, pulling me close. Good, because Daniel doesn't deserve another second of your fear. We'll make him regret every single thing he's done. Together, we walked down the bustling sidewalk toward her car. The city around us seemed brighter somehow, less oppressive. The path ahead would be challenging, but now, finally, I was no longer trapped beneath Daniel's shadow. Now, it was my turn to reclaim my life. By the time Rachel and I arrived back at her home, the Seattle sky had darkened to deep shades of twilight, painting everything in muted blues and grays. Rachel lived in a modest brick townhouse on Capitol Hill, nestled between leafy trees and rows of cozy, historic homes. It felt worlds away from the pristine mansion I'd fled earlier, yet somehow infinitely warmer and more inviting. Inside, Rachel quickly busied herself making tea, offering a sense of normalcy amid the turmoil that still lingered within me. As she moved about the kitchen, I sat quietly at her dining table, my thoughts swirling like the steam rising from the cup she placed gently in front of me. The warmth seeped into my cold fingers, steadying my nerves. Rachel took a seat across from me, her gaze steady but gentle. How are you feeling, Hannah? Really? I exhaled slowly, trying to piece together an honest response from the fragments of my scattered thoughts. Exhausted, afraid, but also strangely relieved. It's like I've finally taken a breath after holding it for years. Rachel nodded knowingly, her expression thoughtful. That makes sense. You've been living under Daniel's shadow for so long. You've forgotten how it feels to breathe freely. But the hardest part, leaving, is behind you now. I shook my head slowly, dread still tightening around my chest. I wish that were true, Rachel. But Daniel isn't going to let this go easily. You don't know how obsessive he can become once he feels he's lost control. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand firmly. Hannah, that's exactly why you're staying here. You're safe. And Julia Hastings won't let Daniel get away with anything now. You've finally got people who won't let him intimidate you anymore. Her reassurance was comforting, but a nagging unease still twisted in my stomach. As if on cue, my phone suddenly vibrated violently against the wooden table, startling us both. Daniel's name flashed insistently across the screen. My pulse quickened, panic rising sharply. Rachel met my gaze calmly. Don't answer. Let it go to voicemail. Julia said to document everything. The call eventually ended, silence settling heavily over the room. Moments later, another notification lit up my screen, a voicemail. I hesitated, fingers trembling as I tapped play, bracing myself for Daniel's fury. His voice filled the silence, cold, controlled, and unmistakably threatening. Hannah, I know you're ignoring me. You have exactly 1 hour to come home before I personally drag you back here. Don't make me come looking for you, it won't end well. The message ended abruptly, leaving a chilling silence. I stared numbly at the phone, fear tightening around me like a vice. Rachel's eyes hardened, her voice unwavering. He's bluffing, Hannah. He's trying to frighten you into returning, because he's terrified that you finally stood up to him. You are not going back. I know, I whispered, fighting the tremor in my voice. But he knows how to get to me. What if he shows up here? Rachel stood decisively, a fire burning fiercely behind her gentle demeanor. If Daniel dares come here, he'll regret it. This isn't his territory. You're not his property anymore. I stared up at her, admiration swelling alongside the anxiety churning within me. Rachel's strength was contagious, gradually replacing my fear with determination. Daniel thrived on intimidation. Yet here, in Rachel's quiet sanctuary, his threats seemed less powerful. Finally, I nodded slowly. You're right. I can't keep running from him. This time, he needs to understand I won't be manipulated. A faint smile spread across Rachel's face, pride evident in her eyes. Exactly. Daniel isn't prepared for this new Hannah, the one who knows her worth and isn't afraid to fight back. Together, we moved to her living room, where Rachel gently placed a blanket over my shoulders. She settled beside me on the couch, our silence comfortable as we watched the city lights flicker to life through rain-speckled windows. For the first time in years, I felt the beginnings of peace, a fragile but growing belief that maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. And yet, even as hope flickered within me, a quiet voice whispered dark warnings. Daniel wouldn't concede defeat easily. He'd built our marriage on control, fear, and dominance, and I'd just dismantled the foundations of his world. He would strike back soon, hard and fast. But this time, when he did, I'd be ready. Night had fully fallen over Seattle, blanketing the city in shades of darkness broken only by streetlights and the steady glow of distant office towers. Rachel had gone upstairs to check on fresh linens for the guest room, leaving me momentarily alone with my thoughts. Wrapped in a soft blanket, I sat quietly by the living room window, gazing out into the rain-slicked streets, lost in contemplation. Suddenly, headlights swept across the front window, slicing through the darkness. My heart froze instantly, dread coiling tight in my chest. A sleek black BMW, Daniel's unmistakable car, slowed to a deliberate stop outside Rachel's townhouse, its engine purring ominously in the still night air. My pulse thundered loudly in my ears as Daniel stepped out, his polished shoes gleaming beneath the street lamp. Moments later, Jessica emerged from the passenger seat, her arms crossed defiantly as though preparing for battle. Fear threatened to swallow me whole, but beneath the fear simmered a powerful current of anger. "Rachel!" I called urgently, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to bring her racing downstairs. She followed my gaze outside, her face tightening with resolve. "Stay here, Hannah. I'll handle this," Rachel instructed firmly, stepping toward the front door. But I stood quickly, reaching out to stop her, determination lending strength to my shaking limbs. "No," I insisted, meeting her surprised gaze. "This is my fight. Daniel needs to hear directly from me that I won't be intimidated anymore." Rachel hesitated briefly, then nodded slowly, understanding the importance of the moment. "All right, but I'm right here beside you. You're not alone." Together, we opened the door and stepped onto the front porch, confronting Daniel and Jessica head-on. Daniel's expression hardened instantly, eyes narrowing dangerously as he registered Rachel's protective stance beside me. "Hannah!" Daniel spoke first, his tone deceptively calm, controlled, his usual mask slipping smoothly into place. "This childish behavior ends now. You're coming home." Jessica smirked beside him, arms still crossed, watching with cold amusement. Honestly, Hannah, do you really think you can walk away that easily? You've always needed Daniel far more than he needed you. The sharp sting of Jessica's words no longer cut as deeply as they once had. My anger flared, steadying my voice as I responded. I'm done allowing you both to manipulate me. I'm never coming back, Daniel. Our marriage is over. Daniel's eyes blazed, his mask of composure cracking, revealing the fury beneath. You think you can just decide when this ends? You've always belonged to me. Remember that. His threatening tone sent shivers down my spine, yet I refused to flinch. Instead, I raised my chin defiantly, meeting his eyes squarely. No, Daniel, you never owned me. You controlled me, and that's finished now. Rachel stepped forward protectively, her voice strong and unwavering. You both need to leave. Right now. Daniel ignored Rachel, eyes still fixed coldly on mine. Hannah, if you stay here tonight, I promise you'll regret it. Come with me willingly, or things will get much worse. I felt Rachel tense beside me, ready to intervene, but I gently placed a hand on her arm. This was my moment, my stand. Summoning courage from somewhere deep within, I spoke calmly, clearly, every word an act of liberation. You've threatened me for the last time, Daniel. I've already spoken to Julia Hastings. You'll receive official notice tomorrow, restraining orders, asset freezes, everything. You've lost control. For the first time, true shock flashed across Daniel's face, momentarily shattering his arrogant facade. Jessica, sensing their defeat, stepped forward aggressively, her voice trembling with indignation. You're pathetic, Hannah. Daniel's given you everything, a home, security, status. Without him, you're nothing. I shook my head slowly, pity replacing my fear. Jessica, it's you who's nothing without Daniel's money. And soon, he'll have nothing left to give you. Your greed has finally destroyed the only person who ever protected you. Jessica recoiled as if slapped, eyes wide with disbelief. Daniel quickly regained his composure, but now a darker, more desperate fury flickered dangerously behind his eyes. He took a threatening step forward, fists clenched tightly at his sides. You've made a serious mistake, Hannah, he hissed venomously, voice low and dangerous. And you'll pay dearly for it. Rachel swiftly stepped in front of me, confronting Daniel without fear. If you come near Hannah again, you'll regret it more than you could possibly imagine. Daniel hesitated, his gaze flicking from Rachel's defiant stance back to my unwavering stare. Finally, sensing he'd lost control completely, he turned sharply on his heel, storming toward the car. Jessica followed hastily, casting one final glare of hatred my way. As Daniel's car sped away, disappearing into the rainy Seattle night, the adrenaline drained suddenly from my body. I leaned heavily against Rachel, breathing deeply, feeling both drained and exhilarated. You did it, Rachel whispered softly, pride evident in her voice as she wrapped an arm around me supportively. You stood your ground. I exhaled shakily, a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety washing over me. Daniel wouldn't accept this defeat quietly. He'd retaliate fiercely, soon and without mercy. But tonight, standing beneath the dim glow of Rachel's porch light, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. Because for the first time in our marriage, Daniel Roberts was the one leaving with fear in his eyes, realizing he no longer held power over me. And that alone felt like sweet revenge. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I lay awake in Rachel's cozy guest room, staring at the soft shadows that danced across the ceiling, my mind replaying Daniel's threats and Jessica's vicious accusations. Yet beneath the anxiety that lingered like a fog, a new resolve burned steadily, a quiet flame building into something fierce and unstoppable. Morning came slowly, Seattle's perpetual gray skies mirroring my mood. I rose early, quietly stepping out onto the balcony overlooking Rachel's small garden, wrapped tightly in a thick wool sweater. Raindrops glittered like tiny crystals on leaves and flowers, the fresh air cool against my skin, clearing away any lingering doubts. Today marked a turning point. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. Rachel appeared shortly after, two steaming mugs of coffee in her hands. She handed one to me silently, and we stood together, watching the city wake beneath a gentle drizzle. "How do you feel?" she finally asked softly. I sipped my coffee, savoring its comforting warmth before responding. "Stronger. For the first time, I feel ready to fight back." Rachel smiled gently, her eyes shining with pride. "Good. Julia called earlier. She secured the temporary restraining order. Daniel can't legally come near you now, or he'll face consequences." A rush of relief surged through me, empowering yet cautious. Daniel wouldn't simply surrender. He'd find new, subtle ways to retaliate. But now, the law stood firmly on my side, a powerful weapon in my fight for freedom. An hour later, I sat beside Rachel in Julia Hastings' office. The freshly printed restraining order lay before me, the official documents representing tangible evidence of my reclaimed power. Julia leaned forward, her expression serious yet confident. "This restraining order is only the beginning," she explained clearly. "Our next step is to regain control of your finances. I've petitioned to freeze all joint accounts. Daniel's pattern of financial coercion and emotional abuse will be enough to grant you temporary control of shared assets. He'll be blindsided. He won't expect you to strike first." A flicker of apprehension crossed my face, but I nodded resolutely. "Do it. Daniel has manipulated me financially for years. If I cut off his ability to control me through money, he'll lose his strongest weapon." Julia's smile widened with approval. "Exactly. He built his power on financial intimidation. Once we remove that foundation, his entire structure collapses." Rachel gently squeezed my hand, encouragement radiating from her. "This is your moment, Hannah. You're finally taking your life back." With determination surging, I signed the documents Julia presented, each signature feeling like an act of defiance, a declaration of independence from Daniel's oppressive shadow. Within hours, Julia's actions took effect. Daniel called repeatedly, frantic messages filling my voicemail with threats, pleas, and accusations as he discovered his accounts frozen. Listening to each message, I felt a strange calm settle over me, no longer terrified but invigorated. His desperation validated everything I'd suffered through. He was finally tasting the helplessness he'd forced upon me for so long. Late that afternoon, Rachel and I returned to her cafe, Sunrise Coffee. As we walked through the front doors, the familiar aromas filled my lungs, grounding me in comfort. Rachel moved behind the counter, preparing orders, while I quietly sat near the large windows, reflecting on my newfound strength. My peaceful moment shattered abruptly when Jessica stormed inside, her fury palpable. Patrons glanced up, startled, as she approached aggressively, eyes blazing with indignation. "You ruined everything, Hannah," she hissed, voice trembling with barely restrained anger. "Daniel can't access his accounts because of you. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I calmly lifted my gaze to meet hers, unfazed by her outburst. "Yes, Jessica. I've freed myself from both your control and Daniel's. Whatever problems you have now, they're no longer my concern." Jessica's jaw dropped slightly, shocked by my calm defiance. "How dare you?" But Rachel quickly intervened, stepping protectively beside me. "Leave Jessica. Hannah owes you nothing. Go solve your own problems." Jessica's eyes narrowed venomously, realizing she'd lost her power here. "This isn't over," she spat bitterly, backing away slowly. "You'll both regret this." Watching her storm from the cafe, I felt a quiet triumph bloom within my chest. Jessica's anger no longer frightened me. In fact, seeing her and Daniel stripped of their entitlement felt incredibly satisfying. Rachel placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You're incredible, Hannah. Daniel and Jessica underestimated your strength, and now they're paying the price. I took a deep breath, allowing myself to embrace that truth. They're not done fighting, Rachel. But now neither am I. Rachel smiled warmly, pride evident in her eyes. Good, because your revenge is just beginning. For the first time, the word revenge resonated deeply, carrying not bitterness, but justice. Daniel and Jessica had forced me into silence for years, believing my kindness equaled weakness. But they'd awakened something powerful, something fierce within me that refused to be contained again. And now, the hunter would finally become the hunted. In the days that followed, Daniel's furious calls slowly dwindled into tense silence. Each ignored threat, each failed attempt to manipulate me only deepened my confidence. The restraining order had delivered a heavy blow to his ego. But I knew the real battle, the final act of our toxic marriage, was yet to come. The rainy Seattle morning was unusually bright as I stood before our former home in Bellevue. No, Daniel's home now, accompanied by Julia and Rachel. Today marked a critical step, retrieving my personal belongings and, symbolically, severing the last thread connecting me to the life I once believed was perfect. As we stepped through the front door, a sense of surreal detachment washed over me. The house was silent, cold, stripped of warmth and meaning. Memories of happier times whispered from every corner, each bittersweet moment reminding me how drastically my world had shifted. Julia spoke calmly, guiding me forward. Take your time, Hannah. You're in control now. I walked upstairs slowly, each step carrying the weight of 1,000 decisions. In the bedroom I once shared with Daniel, I began quietly packing my belongings. Each item placed into the suitcase felt like a small victory, a reclamation of my identity. But as I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, my breath caught sharply. Hidden beneath a stack of forgotten scarves lay a familiar, faded notebook, my old journal, the one Daniel had mocked relentlessly, dismissing my dreams of becoming a writer as trivial fantasies. I picked it up gently, tracing my fingers across its worn cover. Rachel, standing beside me, sensed the shift in my mood. What is it? She asked softly. I smiled sadly. My journal. The part of myself Daniel worked hardest to erase. She squeezed my arm reassuringly. He failed, Hannah. You're stronger than ever now. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed downstairs, shattering the fragile peace. Julia moved protectively toward the bedroom door, eyes narrowed with readiness. Stay here, she instructed firmly, stepping into the hallway. Moments later, Daniel's voice thundered through the house, harsh with rage. Where is she? Hannah. My pulse quickened as Daniel appeared in the bedroom doorway, face flushed red, breathing uneven. He stopped abruptly upon seeing Julia standing protectively in front of me, her presence commanding authority. Daniel, Julia said sternly, you're violating a restraining order. Leave now, or I'll call the police immediately. He ignored Julia, eyes locked fiercely onto mine, desperation edging into his voice. Hannah, stop this insanity. You've made your point. Come home, and we'll forget this ever happened. I shook my head slowly, determination strengthening my voice. It's over, Daniel. There's no going back. You don't control me anymore. Fury flashed across his face, and he took an impulsive step forward, only to be halted instantly by Julia's stern warning. One more step, Daniel, and I promise you'll regret it. He hesitated, breathing heavily, clearly torn between rage and desperation. Finally, his voice broke into something resembling vulnerability. Hannah, please. We can fix this. I need you. Jessica needs you. His attempt at manipulation felt hollow, transparent. I stared back calmly, recognizing clearly now the emptiness behind his words. No, Daniel. You only needed me to prop up your ego, to clean up Jessica's messes. I'm done being your puppet. He stood frozen, disbelief turning into desperation. You'll regret walking away from me. I promise you that. But his threats no longer held power. I stepped forward, Julia and Rachel close behind me, facing him squarely. The only regret I have is wasting so many years living under your shadow. Goodbye, Daniel. With those final words, I walked past him, leaving him speechless and powerless in the center of the empty room. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, the door swung open once more, revealing Jessica, her eyes wide with panic. Daniel! She shouted urgently, oblivious to our presence. The company just called. Your assets have been frozen by the court. Investors are pulling out. They know about your abuse allegations. Daniel, we're finished. He spun around, eyes wild with shock and disbelief. His carefully constructed life, the money, the reputation, the power, was crumbling rapidly around him. For the first time, Daniel Roberts looked utterly lost, completely stripped of control. Jessica noticed us standing there and recoiled sharply, fury replacing panic. You did this, Hannah. You've destroyed everything. I calmly met her enraged gaze, feeling a profound sense of justice. No, Jessica. Daniel destroyed himself. His cruelty, your greed. You both brought this upon yourselves. Together with Julia and Rachel, I stepped outside, breathing deeply as fresh air filled my lungs, washing away years of oppression. Behind me, Daniel's shouts turned to despair, his anger powerless against the reality he'd created. Rachel slipped her arm around my shoulders, smiling warmly. You did it, Hannah. You're finally free. I smiled back, a profound peace settling over me. No, Rachel. We did it. I couldn't have done this alone. Julia nodded approvingly. It's your life again, Hannah. Make it something beautiful. As we walked away from the house, the morning sun broke through the clouds, bathing us in gentle warmth. Each step forward felt lighter, freer, empowered by the sweet justice of revenge, not through bitterness, but by reclaiming everything Daniel had stolen. This wasn't just revenge, it was liberation. And finally, it was mine. In the weeks that followed, I slowly began to rebuild the pieces of my life, not just recovering, but rediscovering the woman I'd long forgotten. My small apartment overlooking Lake Union felt worlds away from Daniel's cold mansion. Here, surrounded by walls that echoed freedom instead of fear, I embraced solitude for the first time, not as loneliness, but as liberation. Days were filled with simple pleasures, morning jogs along the waterfront, quiet afternoons spent writing in the cozy corner of Rachel's cafe, and evenings watching the sun dip below the skyline, each sunset reminding me of the life I'd reclaimed. One afternoon, as I organized books at Rachel's cafe, my eyes landed on an old paperback that stirred a familiar ache of longing within me. The Awakening by Kate Chopin, a story I'd loved deeply years ago, before Daniel had convinced me my dreams of writing were foolish fantasies. Impulsively, I picked it up, leafing through its worn pages. Chopin's powerful words resonated anew, filling me with determination. I'd spent years silencing my own voice, allowing Daniel's cruelty to define my worth. Now, with every sentence, every page, I felt my passion reignite, brighter and stronger than ever before. That evening, sitting alone at my small desk, illuminated only by the soft glow of my laptop, I opened a new document. A blank page stared back at me, not with intimidation, but with infinite possibility. My fingers hovered briefly above the keys, heart beating fast, excitement tinged with fear. Slowly, I began to type, Chapter 1 Awakening. Words flowed freely, unstoppable, capturing the raw truth of my journey. The manipulation, pain, resilience, and ultimately liberation. Writing became not just a dream reclaimed, but therapy, a way to heal wounds Daniel had inflicted over years of silent suffering. As days turned into weeks, pages filled rapidly, each word empowering me, strengthening the woman I was becoming. Rachel eagerly read my chapters, tears of pride glistening in her eyes as she declared, "This is powerful, Hannah. Your voice is extraordinary." Even Julia Hastings praised my efforts, encouraging me to share my story beyond personal catharsis. "Your experience could help countless others trapped by abuse. It's brave, Hannah. Don't ever stop writing." 6 months after leaving Daniel, my novel was complete, a testament to the power of reclaiming one's truth. With Rachel by my side, I stood inside Sunrise Coffee, surrounded by friends and newfound supporters, hosting a modest book launch. Holding my published novel in my hands felt surreal. Proof of how far I'd come from that rainy morning Daniel threw coffee in my face, believing he could silence me forever. As the evening concluded, Rachel gently took my arm, smiling softly. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you, privately," she whispered, gesturing toward a quiet corner. I turned, surprised to see Jessica, standing hesitantly, vulnerability replacing her usual arrogance. Her eyes, previously filled with scorn, now softened by regret. "Hannah," she began quietly, voice unsteady, "I read your book. Every page felt like a mirror reflecting everything I refused to acknowledge. I'm sorry for everything. Daniel destroyed himself, and I let him destroy me too. You deserved better, and honestly, so did I." I studied her carefully, sensing genuine remorse behind her words. Bitterness I'd harbored toward Jessica faded gently, replaced by empathy. "Jessica," I said softly, "it's never too late to reclaim yourself. I had to lose everything before I realized how much strength I truly possessed. Maybe you can find yours now, too." Jessica nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. Without another word, she quietly left the cafe, leaving me with a profound sense of closure, not only for myself, but for her as well. Late that night, alone in my apartment overlooking the glittering city skyline, I stood by the open window, breathing deeply. The air felt different, lighter, sweeter, as though freedom itself had finally found me. My phone buzzed softly, Rachel, texting one final message before bed. "I'm proud of you, Hannah. You've truly awakened, and your journey is just beginning." Smiling, I placed the phone down and turned toward my reflection in the darkened window. The woman who stared back at me was unrecognizable from the frightened person Daniel once controlled. This Hannah was strong, empowered, reborn from pain into resilience. Yes, I'd taken revenge, but not through bitterness or anger. Rather, through living beautifully, reclaiming joy, dignity, and dreams Daniel had sought to erase. My sweetest revenge was choosing myself, again and again, every single day. As the city lights twinkled quietly below, I whispered softly into the night air, promising myself the words Daniel had tried desperately to silence. My story matters. My voice matters. And from now on, nothing, and no one, will ever silence it again. In the silence that followed, a gentle rain began to fall, a cleansing, healing rain, washing away the shadows of my past, leaving only strength, clarity, and hope behind. And finally, standing there beneath that gentle downpour, I knew one undeniable truth. I was free.